Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Untold, the business podcast bringing you the best kept secrets of Utah. Big business stories like Amazon, Apple, Uber, and Tesla are everywhere, but very few people can actually relate to those. And small business is where the real action is, especially in Utah. About half of the total employment in Utah is in small businesses. And Utah small businesses grew more than any other U.S. state in the last 25 years. So today I'm bringing you up close and personal stories from an amazing Utah business. With me today is Ken Anderson, the president and CEO of Universal Synaptics. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, what's the untold story behind Universal Synaptics and how that business got started?
It's actually an interesting story. Our founder was a test engineer at Hill Air Force Base and worked avionics and wiring systems and things like that for aircraft. And the story that I've been told is that he kept running into this phenomenon of no fault found. So a component would fail in operation, the pilot gripe would come into the repair depot. They'd use the existing test equipment and it would test no fault found. It would go back out onto an aircraft and it would fail again. And so this really troubled him. His name's Brent Sorensen. It really troubled Brent. And so the story goes that he just continued to think about this problem. I would say probably obsessively. And he woke up in the middle of the night one night and said, if I could come up with a device that could monitor every single circuit under test while I had that component in my shop, then I could eliminate the randomness of this failure mode. I could actually see it, and then I could actually repair it. And so he set about to invent this device that we now call the portable intermittent fault detector and the intermittent fault detection and isolation system. So he put that obsessive thought into practice, and then with his brother started a business and built that business around being able to resolve the intermittent fault problem that manifests as no fault found. It's as you mentioned at the onset, it was born right here in Utah. This extremely advanced capability was born, right here at Hill Air Force Base. But the concept, anyway.
Wow. So no fault found. So that sounds like when I get the check engine light on my car and I go in and they tell me, oh, there's not a problem. We just reset it.
You're exactly right. Yep, you're exactly right. It's a little less risky when you're in an automobile because you're on the ground. In an aircraft, that becomes a really interesting situation and scenario for a pilot, and typically that check engine light, if you will, manifests as a heads up display that blinks or a radar that loses lock, or if you remember just a few years ago, the entire fleet of F-22 aircraft were grounded due to an onboard oxygen generating system that wouldn't generate oxygen above a certain altitude, which was causing hypoxia with the pilots, and that these aircraft would auger in. So that check engine light is coming on due to various environmental extremes, deloading, vibration. And so you can imagine a pretty scary scenario. You're a pilot in one of the most advanced weapon systems on the planet, and you're in a left-hand 3G turn at 30,000 feet, and your navigation system blinks or turns off. So, it's a quick back off the stick and try to get to an altitude where things magically or intermittently come back and work. When they get that on the ground, they're reporting that check engine light, and then that component comes in and gets tested on our equipment.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little, stakes are a little bit different when you're flying than versus
Yeah,
on the road.
absolutely.
So tell me how big the problem is. So how frequently does this happen? And what kind of market do you guys have to make an impact?
So it's a great question because interestingly, our technology is still, I would say, somewhat viewed as niche, right? Because we're really focused on this particular failure mode. But if you look across, just take the Department of Defense as an example, this no fault found intermittent activity is responsible for 5.5 billion in annual loss, annual waste to taxpayers. More alarming than that is it's responsible for 383,000 non-available days of end item subcomponents. So you do the quick math, you're about 1,000 years of non-availability per year. And the GAO issues lots of reports about this. You know, the F-18 hasn't met its minimum readiness requirement goals for 9 straight fiscal years, or there was just another, they called it a temporary pause, but it was a grounding of the V-22 weapon system, or, you know, all of these sort of things are the cascading impacts of this upstream operational failure mode that isn't being attacked at scale. But that's just Department of Defense. There was a study done recently that for a commercial carrier, no fault found and intermittence is about 250,000 per year per aircraft in loss. So if you look at a major like a Delta Airlines or a United, that's about 40 to 45 million in loss every year due to this failure mode.
So that's like canceled flights and
Canceled delays. Yeah, absolutely. And there isn't a person out there that hasn't been waiting for a flight that's been delayed due to a maintenance issue.
Yeah.
And then they come on and go, hey, we reset the auxiliary power unit and we've been given the green light and we're good to go. Those flights make me, who's someone that's sort of burdened by knowledge, very nervous. When I'm on those flights, I can't wait to get on the ground.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, do you carry one of those with you in your baggage just in case something happens on the flight?
We certainly talked about it. We've certainly talked about it, you know, but I don't know that they'd let us jump into action and solve it. But we have absolutely talked and definitely joked about it.
Oh man, yeah, that's crazy. So big market, it sounds like in the DoD, huge amounts of planes sitting on the ground, unable to be used, and then also market in commercial aviation. Is there anywhere else that you see that this technology could have an impact?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Accenture did a big study and issued the results of that study just in consumer electronics. So, you know, we're talking cell phones, laptops, television sets, etc. And the no fault found intermittent phenomenon is responsible for about 4.9 billion in consumer loss every year. So that's returning that iPhone that just didn't work quite right, or returning that laptop that just didn't work quite right, or only worked in certain scenarios. And so you go get a new one, and those returns go back to those organizations. Just as an interesting kind of point to that, Samsung in South Korea actually uses our equipment for consumer electronics. It's sort of a final assessment test bed before they, you know, sort of box and send to Best Buys and Walmarts and things like that. So broad application. The problem isn't niche. And so we do have this interesting dichotomy that our solution set is still sort of viewed as niche, but that's something we're aggressively working to overcome.
Interesting. So is that why the IT department always asks me first if I turned it off and turned it back on again?
100%. Absolutely. Yep. Do a hard.
That solves the problem half the time. Okay.
Yep. Do a hard reboot. So you got enough of a click over that now it's going to operate for you for a while.
Okay. Right? Okay. So what? Tell me about the how you work with your customers, or tell me a little bit about what kinds of work you do with customers.
Sure. No, that's a great question as well. I mean, because the problem is so pervasive, we kind of joke internally, right? It's small bites of the elephant. So when we first begin to engage with stakeholders or potential customers, one of the things that we're really looking for is, what is your top degrader? So what is the component or wiring harness or system or subsystem that costs the most money, gives your maintainers the biggest headaches? They're constantly coming in and out of the repair center, whether it's an MRO, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul commercial facility, or whether it's a military repair depot. And so we really first begin to drill down into the data set. What's the percentage of no fault found? If I have 100 of these components that come in every month and 75 of them test no fault found, and it costs my organization $20 million a month, these are the kinds of things that we're looking for so that we can really begin to dial in where we should apply the capability first. How do we get our customer or our stakeholders the largest return on investment as quickly as possible? And so we'll begin to analyze that data. And then once we sort of make that collaborative determination, we'll then begin to look at system architecture, test feasibility. And there's a whole series of things that go into, is this the right component? Do they have repair authority, or do they just have engineering authority? Because sometimes that's different and takes place in different bases or on different bases. And once we kind of get all those questions answered, we'll then set about to deliver the right capability mix. So what size of a system do they need? What type of interface cables do they need to connect to this system? What level of training is involved? These types of things. Once we then deliver that system and train those operators, we then work very closely with them to ensure and monitor that data to ensure that they are actually getting a return on investment. Are they seeing those inductions decrease? Are we seeing time on wing increase? Are we seeing some of those cost reductions that we had initially at the onset projected would be there? And typically when we follow that process, we've been very successful with that process. And so typically when we follow that process, we get to some pretty quick and comprehensive maintenance outcomes, which leads to that organization saying, would you take a look at our second highest degrader? Okay. And then we just kind of move through that list. So we do it pretty systematically, and I would say very thoughtfully. We're really looking to provide value to an MRO, a manufacturer, a military depot.
And what would a great result look like for a customer that you've provided?
I've got story after story after story, but I would say one of the early ones that we executed against was on an F-16 radar component, modular low power radio frequency box. It's MLPRF. And the initial government investment was $2.2 million. And this particular component had been at the top of the mission incapable list for a decade. There were 50 plus inductions a month. It was one of the biggest problems in the entire Air Force, not just on F-16, but the entire Air Force. Mm-hmm. And so we delivered 2 systems based on that initial investment of $2.2 million. Worked very closely with that shop, and so fast forward just a year and a half to 2 years later, they had achieved a $68 million return on investment. Time on wing had improved from about 200 hours to about 920 hours. And as mentioned earlier, that led to, hey, we really want you to take a look at this number 2 on the list. So they've done additional cost. The government does this cost avoidance calculation. And so they've since done an additional cost avoidance calculation, which they calculate our equipment in cost avoidance about $150 million in savings. So you're talking $200+ million return on investment for a $2.2 million investment.
Wow.
So pretty solid return. That's been covered and by the Air Force extensively. It's been written about and published in GAO report. Mm-hmm. So not my numbers. These are government numbers.
And if I heard you right, then the time on wing, so it's the time in the air, like tripled. Is that right?
It
Okay.
did. It
So,
did.
okay. Ultimately, you're able
And
to use the equipment more for what it's intended for.
absolutely, right? Because the mission of the F-16 is to fly.
Yeah.
It's not to be broken and in a hangar. So that's I actually that's a really interesting point that you make. So when you think about an average sortie or flight that say an F-16 or a fighter jet makes, it's about an hour. So 926 hours time on wing, you're talking about 5 years of flight time without having a removal.
Yeah.
So that is baking in availability and system readiness.
Okay. And so tell me about the team that's doing all this.
We have an amazing team, and I would say that we are what I'd like to consider sort of the small business of the future. We're sort of a hybrid small business, really, really small team. We've got 10 people. They wear a lot of hats. And our mission focus is if somebody in-house is not contributing directly to the mission, well, then we outsource. So our IT, we have a great company that handles our IT, that's outsourced. We have a great company that handles our human resources, that's outsourced. We have an accounting firm, a law firm. We could easily have 50 or more employees under our roof, but we've chosen to be small, agile, completely mission focused, and one of the things I would share with you is we're all very big fans. We're a company comprised of veterans, and we're all very big fans of retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal. And he wrote this really incredible book called Team of Teams. And we all read it. And my business partners and I, we had a pretty serious conversation about, how does this look when applied to a growing business, a business that is poised for growth. We have a lot of things coming at us at any given time. We're working and dealing with the Department of Defense, which is massive. We're working with, the Delta Airlines and the United Airlines and the Southwest Airlines. These are huge organizations. How do we put something like this into practice?
Yeah.
That said, we fully adopted the team of teams concept. And some of those concepts, one that really, really stuck out to me, and I saw this in business and I've seen this in other companies that I've been involved in, but General McChrystal identifies it as the place where everybody else sucks. So what he noticed during his time in the military was, he's commanding all of these special operations units. And so, the Navy SEALs, well, they think the Army Rangers suck, and the Army Rangers think that the CIA analysts suck, and Army Special Forces thinks that the SEALs suck, right? So you've got the place where everybody sucks.
Yeah.
And he did something pretty profound. He began to commingle these groups and have them collaborate, and he would put a Navy SEAL on a Ranger team and a Ranger embedded with a CIA team, and they would learn from each other and they would run missions. And what he discovered was that their lethality increased exponentially. And this team of teams, because each group is its own team, and now what he had conceived and had put into practice was this team of teams. And so to bring that more into business terms, engineering thinks that business development sucks.
Yeah.
And business development thinks that production sucks because nothing's on time. And, production thinks that marketing sucks.
Yeah.
And so I had seen that in other businesses, and my business partners had seen that as well. And so we set about to essentially kind of break that down and create a team of teams where there is a sense of shared purpose, Everybody communicates. Everybody's in the loop. There is no, quite honestly, there's not even really exclusions from meetings. If we're having a meeting about a partnership renewal agreement, and you'd like to know what's going on and you're not really involved, well, come on in and we'll open up the doors here, and we'll inform you and let you know how we're actually managing and running this business and what the strategy is behind a particular engagement or whatever. And likewise, we'll sit in. You want to sit in a production meeting to see how we're doing and see how operations is going? Well, you're free to do that, or you can go back and talk to our operations officer or our director of production. So nothing is off sides and nothing is off limits. So it is a massive amount of information sharing, which has created, with the book Team of Teams as a blueprint, it has created a sense of shared purpose. And so we're able to accomplish some really unique things with 10 people.
That's incredible. So it sounds like you're creating a common purpose and using transparency to overcome our tribal nature, kind of, of
absolutely
the best and the other people suck, right?
Absolutely. One of the really interesting things that General McChrystal points out is, if you remember business, well, I would say before we implemented our team of teams concept, you think of any business, there's an organization chart, right? And it's top to bottom. And there's somebody in each one of these silos that's designated to be the person that communicates with the next silo. Yeah. And so if you're not part of that information sharing loop, you're getting some information that goes up and some that goes down and these kinds of things. That leads to, in my opinion, and what I think we've demonstrated and proven through the course of what we've been doing, a less productive dynamic and a less cohesive team. And so we just completely deconstructed that and said, hey, organization charts are great. And when people look at them, it makes everybody feel good because they know where they sit in the organization. But is it really effective and is it efficient for how business is today? And our determination, again, with guidance from this phenomenal book, no, it wasn't. Okay. And so, yeah, that's production has a question about the next trade show, they're going to go talk directly to marketing. Okay. There is no designated person. You have a question, you just ask.
Okay. Have you seen, are there any downsides or costs to setting it up the way that you set it
up? I would say downside, it's a great question. I would say at times, and this is pretty rare, but I would say at times you might not need somebody in a meeting, but because of the way we've structured the organization, we really need them kind of focused on something else, but because of the way the organization is. And so that was something we dealt with pretty early on. We've gotten pretty good at saying, hey, we don't need you in this meeting, but if you have some questions, let's definitely connect after. We really need you focused on this particular project, delivery, whatever that might be. So I would say early on, as we really began to fully embrace and implement, everyone wanted to be involved in everything, which I think is a normal, right? When you kind of break down all the walls and say, you can know anything and everything we're doing in the business. Well, that drives everybody's curiosity and wanting to know, particularly where you had been siloed before. But we overcame that pretty quickly, and I don't see, that's not an issue we deal with today, for sure.
I'm curious, when you have such a small team and everyone is mission critical, how do you manage the risk of losing someone, having turnover, people leaving?
So it's a great question. So we do something every year that we call a scroll session, which has sort of an interesting story behind why we call it that. It's essentially a strategy session. Okay. And then we meet a few times throughout the year to refresh it, revise it, whatever. But in every one of those meetings, we do a full team assessment. Are we at risk? Is this person? So we have some extremely talented people there are other organizations that often attempt to poach them.
Yeah.
But we will assess every single team member. Are we at risk of losing this person? Yes or no? Whatever that answer is, we begin to filter and cascade sort of how do we mitigate that? Do we need to mitigate that? Are they solid? These kinds of things. It is a real risk, John, and it's something that we look at multiple times a year. We have lost some great team members, but we've also just even recently onboarded some new great team members. We've not had what I would consider to be a significant amount of turnover, but we have certainly had turnover. And so that is a risk that we look at multiple times a year.
Good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'd like to turn for a second and just ask a couple questions about your personal journey. So I think you were with the company before you became the CEO. Right?
Correct.
I'd love to hear about how your leadership style has evolved or needed to change as you've taken on different roles in the company.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. I in business, I grew up in sort of sales and business development, so I've always been a relationship guy. And so when I first started, I was really focused on business development and sales and marketing and all of these kinds of things, and kind of got to live in my own small piece in the business. Although I interacted with operations and our CEO on a regular basis, and had great relationships with them, and still do. So, but to be totally candid, I am also a bit of a control freak. So the way that my style had to evolve from a leadership perspective is we can't have a sense of shared purpose, and we can't be a team of teams without people having autonomy. And that has been, I wouldn't say struggle, just a shift in mindset, something that I didn't necessarily possess before. I wanted to control the start so that I could hopefully control the outcome, which would lead to revenue, which would lead to equipment sales, which would lead to all these very positive business things that I was personally held accountable for.
Yeah.
The autonomy piece has been for me, the shift. We have a company of what we refer to and what I refer to as A players. These are people that are at the top of their game. Yeah. They deserve that autonomy. Now, obviously, we're there, and I'm there if there's an issue. I'm going to jump in, I'm going to help, or if they run into a snag or roadblock or something. But I think just giving people the ability to be successful without having, sort of mother hen, trying to control all the variables and all the outcomes. But that was a shift that I had to have to really truly implement this sort of team of teams concept. Autonomy had to be part of that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You can't get people fully on board if they don't feel like they've got skin in the game and some kind of accountability and ability to influence, right?
Well, it's hard to have I would say it this way, it's hard to have a sense of shared purpose if every single thing that somebody does, they have to come and ask me if it's okay. Right? That those two things they just don't align.
They don't match.
So sense of shared purpose, autonomy, make good decisions, and then our executive team, we're here to ensure that we keep moving this thing the right direction.
Okay. I'm wondering. So you mentioned you're a veteran, and other folks are veterans on your team. You had to make that transition into the business world, right? I'm curious if you think about your experience. Were there any misconceptions that you had as you kind of transitioned into the business world? Anything that you thought this is the way it works, and you had to learn, like, oh man, no, that's not, that doesn't compute here. Anything that you would highlight about that transition that you learned that might help others?
Yeah. So one thing, my military experience was very team oriented,
Mm,
and you had a battle buddy who was your kind of assigned best friend who ends up kind of becoming your best friend, and then everybody's got their own battle buddy, and then you're in a platoon, and then you're in a troop, and right, and everybody's really looking out for everybody else all the time because that is a very focused mission.
mm,
And when you start to work in a company, I think I just sort of incorrectly assumed, well, that would be the same, right? Because everyone's going to be focused on profitability, everyone's going to be focused on growth. So we're all kind of pulling together. And in the sales and business development world, and I'm telling you something that you already know. I mean, it is dog eat dog, right?
yeah,
It has who has the best numbers, who's hitting the quotas, and then when the month changes over, it's what have you done for me lately? I don't care what you did last month.
yeah,
What are you going to do for me this month? That was a bit of a culture shock, right? So, um, but I would say when I first got into business, it was a 6 to 9 month process of really struggle, which is a great lesson to learn. Struggling and having adversity, what a great teacher. So, kind of figuring out some of those things, figuring out who in a particular organization you could lean on, who could be trusted, who you kind of needed to watch your back. They might go poach a customer, or they might poach a client from you, which is going to impact your numbers. And so, I would say just sort of that transition of it, what I would consider to be a bit of adversity,
mm.
was pretty eye opening and
Okay.
much different than what I expected.
Yeah, on that learning topic. I think we learn also probably the fastest and the most from our failures, right, or setbacks. Was there any setback or failure that in that you had in your career that in hindsight became one of the biggest teachers?
It's funny. I've had lots of those. I've made lots of errors in judgment, or focused on a particular strategy that did not pan out the way that I thought it would pan out, or um, something happened. You think you're just going to hit this little pass here, and you're going to hang a left, and instead it goes to the right, and it completely falls apart. So I've had lots of I've paid lots of business tuition. I would put it
Mm,
that way. So yeah, I've certainly dealt with lots of things that were disappointing, or um, heartbreaking, or you have a partner who you really, really care for, you really care about the people in the organization, but the partnership just isn't doing what it was meant to do. And so the only business decision you can come to is terminate that business partnership, but you're leaving these other folks who you care about. So I've dealt with all kinds of things like that that have been tremendous lessons, as I've been doing this.
awesome. Um, I wonder if you look back, maybe at what your plans were 3 years ago. Is US Synaptics where you expected to be after 3 years?
Well, I'm going to take it back even farther. When I first started with this organization in 2009, and I was taught and trained what this capability did, the size and the scope of the problem across the Department of Defense, that this capability directly impacted warfighter readiness. Um, and I do still to this day catch a little bit of grief about this. I made a comment, well, this is just such a no brainer. I'm going to have these systems across the entire department in about 6 months, right? So arrogance, little bit of, being naive. But then when that 6 month time frame didn't happen, and you have a little bit of an ego death, you start trying to figure out, how do I actually go do this? And it's much more complicated and complex than one would think. So I thought we would be further along in 2009, but yeah. So 3 years ago, am I happy where we were 3 years ago? No. Was it were the goals achieved that we set to achieve 3 years ago? Some of them were. Some of them were not, right? And so those roll to the next year and the next year, and trying to figure
Those
out.
become the learnings for the next cycle, right?
Absolutely. And you really assess that and go, how did we not achieve that? And it was right in front of us. How did we not achieve that? So let's get really smart, and let's figure out what we need to do to solve that situation and navigate that particular problem set. And let's keep that on the list of goals.
So what is next for Universal Synaptics? So what's your focus going forward from here?
Well, I mean, world domination, of course. Not really. So we've made tremendous headway and had a large amount, or I would say a decent amount of what we consider to be little victories. So where do we go from here? Our portable intermittent fault detector is the only approved wire tester on the F-35 global program. That's due in large part to a partnership that we were able to establish with Lockheed Martin. That's a huge victory for a small company of 10 people. We're approved by Boeing, so our portable is in the aircraft maintenance manuals for all Boeing type model series commercial aircraft. That's a little victory that we're seeing orders, and we're seeing commercial operators begin to really sort of use the equipment and things like that. So where we go is we continue to be laser focused on solving this intermittent no fault found problem, delivering real maintenance solutions and sustainment solutions to our stakeholders and our customers and our partners. And we're really focused on, we want to make the F-35 the most healthy, most ready weapon system on the planet, because all of that business tuition that was paid on some of those other platforms that we attempted to become completely ingrained with, that didn't fully adopt it or adopted it in pockets. I imagine at some point I may be able to make a phone call and say, see, I told you so, and potentially get them to fully adopt it. So, yeah, I would say a really, really heavy focus on the F-35 program, and still pushing and getting our capability out into the hands of maintainers, whether they be in uniform or not in uniform.
Okay. I'd like to test you now. So see what you've learned since 2009 about goal setting. Okay. So if everything goes the way you plan it, like, what do you think your business will look like, or what do you think your life will look like in 5 years?
So we do have a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year plan.
Okay.
And we do put those goals that we know are really difficult, and it's going to be a slog. Those are a little bit farther out there. 5 years from now, if we achieve all those goals, I would imagine my travel schedule is greatly reduced. I'll get my weekends back. I'll get my evenings back. And we'll be taking a massive, just absolutely massive and significant dent out of that $5.5 billion problem. I'd like to talk to you in 5 years, John, and say, hey, that problem's now 150 million a year. Wow. Instead of talking to you in 5 years and saying, that problem's now 12 billion a year.
Okay.
Right. So if we achieve the things that we've set out to achieve, I think we see massive increases in readiness, massive cost reductions, and I think the level of effort, ideally, I don't know, maybe decreases a little bit. I'm not sure.
Okay. So, on that point, you're traveling a lot. You've got, clients, people spread out all over the place. Tell me about what keeps you going. Like, why are you working so hard?
Uh, well, I think a couple reasons. I mean, the first reason, I know that this capability that we deliver has a direct impact to weapon system readiness and commercial aircraft safety.
Mm.
So that is a big motivator for me. I mean, as the United States with democratic ideals, we continue to send young men and women into very scary, faraway places. And a ship that can't sail, an aircraft that can't fly, a tank that can't operate is of no value uh, to us or to those young men and women that are in this scary, faraway place. That's a big motivator for me.
Mm.
Also, I have a family and I travel a lot, and I see a lot of families on a lot of airplanes. And well, I'd sure like to have even just a small part in making that safer. So those are big motivators for me. I would say the other, and I'll just be candid, I am really stubborn. So I've been told many, many times that I was not going to be able to, you'll never be able to partner with Lockheed Martin. It's too lofty. Okay, I'm partnered with Lockheed Martin.
Mm.
You'll never get on the F-35 program. It's too big. That's too lofty a goal. I'm on the F-35 program. I mean, I'm not. Our testers on the F-35 program. You'll never partner with Boeing.
Yeah.
They're too big, and we're partnered with Boeing. So I'm pretty stubborn. So if just tell me there's something that I won't be able to achieve, and then I'll do everything I can to try to achieve it. I'm not always successful,
Okay.
but I'll sure give it my best effort.
I'll make sure to send a recording of this to your board.
They know this about me already, so
Okay.
yep, they already know. In fact, we have a board member, our former CEO, the CEO that actually hired me, that I worked for, who's a member of our board. And I actually think that he knows this about me. I think he says some of these things on purpose.
No. Okay.
You're never going to hit those numbers, right?
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, good. So with all that that you're trying to accomplish, like, how do you keep yourself going? Do you have a routine or a way that you manage to keep your energy high to accomplish this stuff?
I do have I wouldn't say strict, but I would say I do have a pretty regimented routine, and I think part of that is just likely carryover from being in the military, where things are so regimented, and you have an actual routine that you stick to. So I'm an early riser. I'm up 4:15, 4:30 every day, 5 days a week. Well, I get up that early on the weekends too, but 5 days a week I work out. I'm in the gym. I get a decent amount of exercise. I try to eat the right ways. Try to start early. When I find myself getting maybe a little bit run down or a little bit tired, I do try to kind of manage not only the mental capacity, but physically, how am I feeling? Take a break here or there.
Okay.
And then I'll typically push hard into the early evening hours. I do try to be in bed, not asleep, but I do try to be in bed by 9, and try to be asleep by about 9:30. And even when I'm traveling, I do the same thing. So whatever that time zone is, that becomes the new time zone that I'm doing that in. And I've been doing that for years, a long, long time. And it seems like, or it feels like it works for me. I don't know that that's for everybody, but it seems to be a schedule and a regime that works pretty well for me. I do still get up early on the Saturdays and Sundays, but that's kind of some quiet time before the family wakes up. I'm not working out or doing any of those things. I do try to kind of take that time to, read or decompress, really. So then, I can kind of enjoy, because we do work. There are a lot of projects where we're working the weekends, or we have foreign partners, and our Sunday is their Monday. So we do a lot of that, but I do try to take advantage of the time when I'm not fully engaged in that way.
Okay. Okay. I'm curious. You mentioned General McChrystal earlier. Are there any other leaders that had a particularly big impact on your life? So maybe somebody that you consider a role model, or somebody that you kind of follow?
I've had many. I've had many. There are so many people that I've crossed paths with, or interacted with, or done business with, or been partnered with, or even currently today work with, who I look up to and who I admire, and try to adopt some of their best characteristics, or I really try to look at how other people look at problems, and if I'm thinking things should be a certain way, but my business partners think it's this way, I actually really try to understand, what are they seeing that I'm not seeing, and I really try to look at other leadership styles. But there are lots of leaders. I've been really, really fortunate on this path that I'm on, whether it was military leaders, business leaders, early mentors. One of my earliest mentors when I first got into business was a woman who was just an amazing business person and an amazing relationship builder. And I tried to learn as much as I could from her, and she was gracious enough to sort of share those kinds of things with me. And I'm a young kid out of the military asking her a bunch of questions, and she could have brushed me off and didn't. And so I've just been so fortunate to be around great people. And I've been around some not so great people too, but I've been very fortunate to be around great people that I've been able to learn from. And it's interesting. I have a mindset that, I know enough to know there's more I need to know. I don't have all the answers. Learning is a constant process, and I try to learn from every situation and environment, person that I interact with. What do they do? What do they see? How do they see? Why do they see things this way? And what am I not seeing to get me to that kind of a mindset, or to that kind of a solution? So lots. I mean, I could certainly name some, but I'll protect the innocent. But I've been around some great people.
Well, it sounds, I'm hearing a lot of humility in what you said, right? And yeah, I don't have all the answers, and being willing and looking to learn, right? And it seems like a quality I've seen in a lot of really great leaders too. So,
Thanks for saying that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
but you talked about some ambitions, right? That were pretty big, right? I mean, you're wanting to really make an impact on safety and lives, and significant impact in the military, and support people in the armed services. What would it mean to you to achieve those things?
That's a great question, and it's a difficult one to answer because I've been in the grind of it, um, thinking about how to do it, not so much thinking about what does it look like when we do it. Um, I can only imagine that it there would be a great sense of satisfaction, because it is something that I care so deeply about. And I know that it has such a real, proven positive impact. Um, John, I think when we achieve it, I think I'm going to be able to sit down for a minute where it'll be quiet and just have a big smile on my face. And I'll probably go, I can't believe we actually did it. I can't, are we done? We're done, I guess. We did this thing. So I think it'll be something like that.
Awesome. Well, great. Appreciate you sharing your story with us tonight. I'm wondering if you have any, thinking about the maybe budding entrepreneur, the person just, kind of coming in and thinking about starting something new or jumping into a new venture. Would you have any advice for that young person on the precipice?
I don't know that advice. I would say one thing that was an interesting learning piece for me is if you have a capability, a technology, an idea, an innovation that you believe is disruptive, it is in your interest to find out what it is disrupting. Because whatever it is disrupting could potentially be a billion, 100 million, 100 billion. You don't know how big that industry is that you are disrupting, and people will fight to maintain that stronghold. And that is something that I did not consider early on. We are a very disruptive capability. We tick all the boxes, right? Readiness, reduce cost, all these things. However, there is a big industry out there. There is a lot of vested interest in maintaining the status quo. So my advice would be a critical thinker, be a problem solver, do everything you can to develop business acumen, not process acumen, right? But real business acumen, and then understand what you are disrupting. Nice. Because that will give you a good sense of, is this a 2-year journey? Or in my case, is this a 16-year or a 20-year journey? Something I grossly underestimated.
Right. Yeah. What's the resistance? Right.
Mm-hmm.
The inertia you got to overcome. Awesome. That's fantastic advice. Well, thank you, Ken. Thanks for a great session today. Appreciate your insights and learning about your company and the impact that you're having at Universal Synaptics. Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and wrap this session. So any final words?
Just thank you. Really, really, really appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation with you, John. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. Untold, best kept secrets in Utah. I think we're one of the best kept secrets in Utah. We're known pretty well in other states and across the Department of Defense and across some of these really major corporations, and even into many other countries. I don't know that anyone knows what we do or that we even exist in the state of Utah. So I think we're one of the best kept secrets in the state, and I appreciate you shining a little bit of light on us and providing me with the opportunity to talk to you a little bit. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks, Ken.